got an outstanding panel here called Championing Career Readiness. What are the policies and steps we can take as states to really move this agenda forward? And our moderator today couldn't be better for the Southwest Pathways Conference. Rich Crandall is a former state senator here in Arizona. He's currently the Commissioner of Education in Colorado. He also served as the state superintendent in Wyoming, and he's got strong ties in Utah as well. So there really isn't a better leader to talk about what's going on in the Southwest than Rich Crandall. Now, joining him on the panel, we have a national, really a national panel here. We've got Terry Holliday sitting right here, the past Commissioner of Education in the state of Kentucky. Terry is really a national leader in terms of promoting the idea of career readiness. And what Kentucky has done is an inspiration, should be an inspiration for every state. It's really changed the culture of education in Kentucky, and he's going to tell us how that happened. Sitting next to him is Dr. Scott Solberg. He's professor of education at the Boston College School of Education, national leader. Boston University, I'm sorry. Those are two very different schools. Yeah, he's at BU, not BC. And he's a national leader in career development. He's active in our efforts to form a national coalition, career development coalition. Sitting over here is Steve DeWitt, Deputy Executive Director of ACTE. He's going to talk about the importance of high-quality CTE. And here, sitting next to me, is Jen Zinth from ECS, and she's an expert on really what's going on around the country. ECS is a national clearinghouse for research that's being done around the country. So I'm going to turn it over to our distinguished moderator. Thank you.
Good morning. It is wonderful to be here. I know a bunch of you are thinking, thought we got rid of this dirt bag there. That's the challenge when you take a job in the middle of the school year, and many of you know I have a lot of kids, senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. They're like, okay, Dad, where are you cutting that line? Who's moving to Denver, who's not? Things like that. But it is a true honor to be here on probably one of my favorite topics. And with definitely one gentleman that I truly admire and three others that I am learning more about and will be tapping into their skill set. Terry has been a mentor of mine for a long time now and is truly helping us as he flies out to Colorado. Stop talking about this. We talk, and not just about CTE. We, in public policy, we are the kings of talking. We have conferences, we have events, we have gatherings, task forces. Just this morning, I got an email just now that the legislature just created a task force that I need to staff on ESSA implementation. One thing about Colorado, a bill can be introduced at any time. So this bill was introduced 2 days ago and it passed today. So I was, when Bill came and had dinner with me in Colorado, I was so excited to see that he was going to take this up a notch and say, let's have a panel just on implementing everything that we're talking about. And that's what we're going to do today. And I want to get to these panelists because these are people who are doers. They've actually done it. But Jen, I'm going to start right with you because you do fantastic research at ECS. And I was reading over several of the things that you talked about. And one was you said that up until about 2013, all the legislation things around CTE were kind of just to make sure it complied with Perkins and stuff like that. But the conversation really changed. Will you tell us why did the conversation change and what direction do you see it going from the policy standpoint?
Sure. So as many of you in the room probably know, as you said, up until 2013, a lot of the policies, state policies around CTE were more Perkins compliance, really nibbling around the edges, maybe tinkering with high school graduation requirements, these sorts of things. And in 2013, we saw this absolute spike in policymaking across the states, and it wasn't just the number of bills that we were seeing enacted, but the variety of approaches that states were taking as they looked at their CTE policies. So we saw California in 2013 putting a $250 million appropriation into the California Career Pathways Trust, which they've re-upped over the last couple of legislative sessions. Do we have to turn it up? Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, great, thanks. We saw other states that looked at teacher qualifications and ensuring that CTE teachers had appropriate credentials. We saw some states beginning to look at career counseling and advising and making sure that students and their families are aware of the career opportunities out there. Up again, is it better now? Okay. I don't have a teacher voice. We saw states looking at, again, high school graduation requirements, also looking at early college opportunities, dual enrollment, early college, high schools, these types of models, and I'm happy to talk further about that a little bit later. Looking at accountability systems, which I know we're going to touch upon a little bit later, and also data, getting data into the hands of teachers, students, their families, school staff, so that they are actually aware of what the current job opportunities are, what the salaries are associated with those, what the educational credentials required are, and incentivizing especially high school students to pursue credentials aligned with these high demand, high wage opportunities. That said, with a couple of exceptions, we're not seeing very many states take a comprehensive look because so many of these things are so interconnected. You can't talk about high school graduation requirements if there's no alignment to current job opportunities that we're talking about opportunities from 5-10 years ago. And I'll stop there. We can have more in Q&A or offline.
You bet. Jennifer, thank you so much, because that the alignment is turning out to be critical. And I know several states. Scott, I wanted to jump to you real quick to talk about the education piece, but also, Scott, you had the chance to attend, if I remember correctly, the National February 22nd meeting. Tell us a little bit about that, who was there with the National Chamber, and then from an education standpoint, research, what are you seeing in the world of CTE?
Okay. So, yeah, the National Convening on Career Development was really about bringing together the employers that we have here today, bringing together the research community, the practitioner community, the national organizations, to sit down and really talk about career development. I think that, probably part of my initial comment is that it's not a CTE movement. Career development is beyond that. But CTE is basically created the backbone from which we can do and deliver a national career development movement. The 16 career clusters and the pathways and the linkages that's been going on, the focus on work-based learning, is what we have to scale across the whole K-12 system. And we need to get it into the community college and the adult learners. They need access to these as well. And so what's happening then is that it's not a CTE movement. It's how do we help all youth start driving their own process towards career goals that they've identified based on looking at their skills, their interests, and their values. I know today we've had a strong message that we need to focus on the pipeline. Not disagreeing with that. But the way we can do it is in a way that still builds on the youth capacity to still define their own pathway. In doing so, especially around the career exploration, we want them to look at labor market. We want them to have access to work-based learning opportunities because it builds their capacity. But we're not saying we're doing it to build more plumbers. We're doing it to build a stronger community. And that focus of letting the individual really build their skill sets, drive the process, is what we're terming really around the idea of personalized career management plans. That if that becomes the focus, helping each individual and their family design and do this, then what we get is a national movement around career development that focuses on all of it. It builds much more access to career tech ed because we're helping all youth.
Okay, Scott, let me call you out there for a second.
Yeah.
Give me an example of a school that is letting kids choose that.
Okay.
And how are they doing it?
Well, so we have, I'm going to do a shout out to my colleagues from Colorado. Do you want to stand up, Robin? And to Kay Schreiber. Kay, stand up, from Arizona. They have districts in their states that are models for exactly this. I heard stories from Colorado that they're finding that this process of helping youth drive their career development is lowering teenage pregnancy rates. We heard stories in southwest rural parts where the Latino graduation rate is now exceeding the rest of the population. We got stories coming out of Arizona where schools, the districts that had the worst districts, are now at the top in their state. And they all credit it on flipping it around to where we let the individual drive this process. Because what happens when they get a goal, what's the next question? How do I get there? And how I get there is through education, and I get there through learning and getting a deeper understanding through work-based learning. We can't do this without the career tech ed as the backbone, but this is not a career tech ed movement. It's a movement for all youth, 4-year, 2-year credential, all of it is the same. We want every child to have a plan that says, how do I get to where I want to go through a 2-year? I went through the 2-year process. My father got a degree in printed circuit board as a 2-year college and then went on and kept building his skill set. So I'm all about the 2-year college. Love it and want it. I want every student to look at that as an economic value. We need to decrease the debt. But what we really want is to let the individual build their capacity. And the final point, and then I'll get off the stage, well, not off completely, I'll just stop talking, is we have to always be focused on the fact that we've got so many intelligent youth, and they don't yet have the skills to demonstrate that intelligence. When we focus on that, then what we're doing with career development is we're trying to build that capacity. We heard the concept of self-determination, that's exactly it. But also in the Native culture, they talk about vision quest. In our African American community, we talk about power. These are all the same kinds of concepts that the individual is stepping up and taking charge of their life course. That's what we can do with the national effort around career development.
Wow.
Thank you.
Scott, thanks. I love that passion for it. That'll be one of my big takeaways, is it is not a CTE movement, it is a career development movement. Such a smart point. Steve, pick on you for a quick second then, because we've talked about the policy, we've talked about education. We're kind of leading up to Terry and his Kentucky experience. Talk to us about the association, what you're seeing there in the movement across the country.
Yeah, sure. So we represent educators who are in career and technical education space, but I completely agree with Scott in terms of this is about a movement of inclusion of all students and helping them to choose their career paths. We did a definition back in 2009 of what is career ready, and we talked about 3 skill set areas: academic, technical, and employability, or soft skills, the dreaded word soft. And really, out of that came other discussions and other conversations. And I think when we had a career readiness coalition that was built around that later, that Advanced CTE led, part of the next step was really talking about self-determination, and that students really have to have access to information and that they have to self-direct themselves. And so we need, I think that's where the conversation is going, and the conversation here this week about opportunity youth and inclusion of all students is exactly where we need to be heading. The association, I think, views the program of study as a key part in career and technical education, and something that can be replicated in other places. A program of study, as defined in Perkins, is about having articulated programs, secondary to post-secondary, and leading to a meaningful credential, whether that's a certification, a degree, or something else. So
Steve, in the world of the association then, what do you see as the role of business and industry, and how are you helping to facilitate that?
It's absolutely critical. The comments we've had here about business and industry needing to be, in many cases, leading or a critical part of those programs. We have, for instance, an advisory board manual that talks about how you build those effective advisory boards, where business and industry are not just talking at a meeting in pleasantries, but they're really at the table talking about curriculum and what needs to be reflected.
Okay, what's a state, who's a state that's done this well?
3 states come to mind. Kentucky's at the top of the list, I think. Louisiana, I said 3, and I looked at my notes before. What's the third one? Well, Alabama
Puerto
actually
Rico,
is making some very good strides forward and has a great systemic view.
They really do. I had a chance to go to a CTE conference about 8 years ago in Huntsville. It blew me away what they were already doing there. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. So to facilitate these roundtables that drive that conversation of what we're looking for and what the certificates would look like at the end. That's part of what you're saying as far as business?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That they have to be at the table. They have to be part of significant conversations with administrators in those institutions. It's got to include work-based learning. And I think this is a place where our association's trying to make some improvements. We're really trying to improve the conversation between educators and employers, and we have a whole set of activities we're doing.
Fabulous. Those of you from Arizona will know a gentleman by the name of Bob King, who used to be the head of the Arizona Community Foundation, and then he got a great job to go to Kentucky and be the head of higher ed in Kentucky. And Terry and Bob are very, very close, having worked together and good friends. When I got the job in Colorado, one of my first phone calls was to Bob to say, hey, I hear fantastic things about what Kentucky is doing in CTE. And Bob said, it is legit, it is all for real. And then he sent me tons of information on it. And then I had the opportunity to have Terry fly out. He is one of CCSSO's personal trainers, especially for new chiefs. And so he travels the country training new chiefs on how to get the job done, having been one for so many years in Kentucky. Terry, here's the million-dollar question then. How did you move it from a conversation to actual practice?
Well, chiefs have 3 levers. You got policy regulation, you got funding, and you got accountability. Didn't have any money, so accountability seemed to be it. How can you drive behaviors that change culture? So accountability, you know, we had No Child Left Behind for years. It certainly changed behavior, some good, some bad. But it certainly changed the culture to focus on disaggregating data and achievement gaps. So what we were doing typically at the time, all of y'all were doing the same thing. We need more kids ready for college. 80% remediation rates. Kids aren't ready for college. So I'm going out with the Chamber of Commerce president, speaking at his annual chamber event, and this same experience probably has happened to you. One guy in the back says, well, Dr. Holliday, appreciate all this college-ready stuff. We certainly need kids more ready, and they need to quit paying for remedial courses. But Dr. Holliday, I stopped at 7-Eleven this morning to get gas, went in and get a cup of coffee, and the kid behind the counter was a neighbor's kid who recently graduated from the University of Louisville with a 4-year degree in psychology, and he can't find work. But Dr. Holliday, I've been advertising for 6 weeks now to find 3 welders with a starting salary of $60,000, and I can't find anybody with the skills that we need to fill those jobs. So Dr. Holliday, what are you going to do about career ready? Well, that changed us midstream. We were working on the No Child Left Behind waiver, accountability, flexibility, and so all of a sudden we needed to think about career ready, and we needed to think about military ready, because only 1 in 5 kids are military ready, and we had 2 large bases in Kentucky. So we utilized our business community. Key lever here, this is not ed reform, this is economic reform. So the business community had to lead this effort because it didn't quite fit what the General Assembly had told us to do, but it made all the sense in the world. So we built an accountability model focused on career ready, because if we had stuck with just college ready, you know what we would have done? Just reshuffled the zip code a little bit at the top. And those economic poor counties, especially in eastern Kentucky, and you got a great guy from Johnson County that'll be doing a breakout, I think later, could tell you a little bit more. How could we restore hope and change culture in poverty-stricken eastern Kentucky and western Kentucky and south central Kentucky, and let them think they could compete with the more socio-economically advantaged districts? Well, it happened. So when we started this, we had 30% of our high school graduates were college career ready. And you say, oh, poor Kentucky. Well, hell, Massachusetts no better. They probably about 32%. You know? New York, David Steiner was commissioner at the time, and his estimate based on the Regents exam was in the low 30s. The NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress, had academically prepared about 30% in math and 34% in reading. So the numbers in your state are probably similar. So set a great goal, build an accountability system, provide the resources, support, leverage to move it, and 5 years later, 67% of the graduates from Kentucky high schools were college and career ready. It's savings of about $15 million in remedial costs. Economic, we can track them all the way through the labor market. We'll see where they're getting jobs and how they're doing in their chosen careers. So the accountability model was probably the biggest thing that changed the high school cultures in Kentucky.
Turn to a quick follow-up to that. What are you doing with middle schoolers to try and prime that pipeline?
I think Kentucky had long had probably one of the early states with the individual alliance learning plans, and getting those career counseling and the focus and the components and the online support for that. One little thing we did called Operation Preparation. I didn't like that ILP had become more of just a checkbox thing with teachers. So we put in place a process to ensure every 8th grader in Kentucky met with a living adult other than the guidance counselor to actually review the ILP, talk about progress, and do a better job connecting to parents and family. And building in the measures, especially all the way through middle and high school, that gave good predictors of not just college ready, but also career ready.
Okay. Thanks, Darren. We'll be coming back to Kentucky there. Okay, panelists, we have three organizations. We've got the executive branch, the governor's office, we've got the legislative, and then we've got business and industry. You're the consultants, overpaid, who are coming into our state, who are saying, what's something you would what would you tell one of those three bodies would have the greatest ROI? What could they do the next 12 months to expand this work, to get it rolling, or maybe you're like Kentucky to expand it? What would your advice be, and which of these bodies would it be to? Maybe it's to all three. Steve, let's start on this end.
Yeah, I will choose policy only because that's my background. Okay. And I think probably it's already something that states are doing quite a bit, and something that we've also focused on the state level, which is including career readiness measures in your, whether it's your school report card or your state report card. We actually pushed that at the federal level, and the new ESSA law includes that. So you include dual enrollment, certifications, those type of measures, so parents and students can see beyond the diploma what other types of career readiness measures are included in that institution.
Great answer. That is a great answer. There.
One thing I suggest actually involves all three of those stakeholders, and we are seeing a fair number of states take this approach, and it's where you either create an incentive for K-12, higher education, and business to collaborate to develop new pathways, and the state provides funding to support teacher preparation, curriculum development, equipment, facilities, and these sorts of things. There are a couple, like I mentioned, California, they have the Career Pathways Trust, where K-12, post-secondary partners, and business can all work together to develop career pathways aligned to regional workforce demands that are being unmet. Or there's an approach that Colorado has taken in a couple of rounds of funding where they've identified the State Workforce Development Board to work with business partners and K-12 and higher education to develop pathways, initially around manufacturing in 2013 legislation, and then this past legislative session around healthcare, IT, and construction-related trades.
Interesting. So besides California, what's another state doing that well?
Indiana is a great example. They were one of the early adopters back in 2013, and rather than make it purely competitive grants, the governor was assigned to identify 13 regions within the state, and each of those regions was tasked with doing an inventory of high school CTE programs in their area, and then comparing that against local workforce needs, and then developing new curricula via 2 rounds of funding from the governor's office to redesign curricula and buy equipment and teacher training and these sorts of things. We have seen outcomes from this work in Indiana.
Cool. I know they're a little preoccupied today. Maybe we'll call them tomorrow and see what they have to say in Indiana. Scott, I'll come to you first.
Sure. So let me focus a little bit on the employer part. So I think Opportunity Nation did she didn't have time to go into all the data they have, but it's an amazing data set that everyone in the community can come and wrap their arms around. And it basically shows that we've got things we need to do with the education system, the employer setting, health access. Everyone needs to have a role to build a stronger community. But the employers, we need them to understand that they're part of that, and that with the chamber's help and creating a cross-sector community of individuals around career development, we're seeing this in states. We can help build the work-based learning structures that are necessary to help all youth have a chance to have some kind of learning opportunity that's aligned to their interests. You're seeing, Wisconsin hasn't been mentioned, but they've done a great job on this, where they actually have apprenticeships and they have skill sets that get signed off by the employer. We're also getting the point where the career tech ed community within the New North area of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, has put over $1 million of new equipment into the high school because they see them as a part of their strand of development. So you help the employers really see that what's happening and what can happen, play an important role, and it's going to happen through the work-based learning opportunities. The nice part is we've already got technology that will allow them to put in anything they want to do for youth and adults, anything, whether it's job shadowing, coming out and giving a talk, providing paid internships, summer employment, whatever they want to do. And then when the individual is searching through the opportunities, they can see exactly what's available in their backyard.
Thanks, Scott.
Well, interestingly enough, I won't tell the state, but recently I was sitting at the table helping coach a state. The governor's office was there, economic development was there, workforce cabinet was there, K-12, post-secondary, all the key players were there. Number one thing, get rid of your silos. You've got a wonderful opportunity with WIOA and workforce investment boards, and eventually, probably 2 years out, reauthorization of Carl Perkins, but these silos cannot exist anymore. What you need is in the governor's office, a workforce development council that has governance and power to ensure cross-functional collaboration here. Because if we just keep doing it the way we've always done it, we'll be back here 20 years again. You know, the last time was in '86 when we did tech prep, right? And here we are, 2016, that's 30 years. So we'll be back here again 20, 30 years saying it didn't work. If you don't fix the cross-functional collaboration at the state level, and in my opinion, builds onto exactly the right target here. We need a cross-functional group at the national level to keep the heat on. We need the chamber, we need the business leadership, we need the state leadership of state superintendents, we need economic, labor, and workforce, because when you go in and start trying to address the issues around work-based learning, if you don't have all those people at the table, you're not going to get it done. And you can't, accountability by itself in K-12 will not get it done, because then what happens to seamless pathways to post-secondary? They got to be at the table too, because then you're starting to talk about stackable credentials, which lead to a job that pays a living wage tied back to your sector strategy. If you leave K-12 alone, you're going to keep having those outdated CTE programs that the Speaker of the House, sister-in-law, teaches in a school district in eastern Kentucky. I mean, it's just going to happen like that, folks. And the second thing that I told them, if you don't convince parents that this is important, it ain't going to work. Because parents, you can sit them all in a room, you can tell them all the things, you know, you can say they make a lot more money with stackable credentials, a lot cheaper, less college debt. Where would you rather have your kid go to a 4-year program and there's not much job opportunity? They always say 4-year program. You got to change community and parent perceptions of economic opportunities through career and technical education.
This is wonderful advice. It's interesting, I was with the code.org folks last week. We were just having dinner talking about how to expand computer science education, specifically in Colorado. And I said, who's the #1 state? They said, well, really for computer science education, Arkansas is leading the way. I said, Arkansas? Well, why? And this goes back to what Terry just said. Well, the governor's granddaughter did Hour of Code, and she came home to tell him about it. Next thing you know, they're the #1 state in computer science education. Those things, you don't see that coming. Now, let's switch gears for just a second, because the ESSA came up. And it's kind of fun because today, May 4th, we are launching the ESSA listening tour in Colorado. We have 7 locations around the state, starting today in Pueblo and Grand Junction, and talking with folks about what ESSA is and what the opportunities are. Every single person I've met with for the last 2 weeks, about this topic, I will say, what do you think is the most important thing about ESSA? What's the most critical piece of it? What's the thing we need to be watching most closely? And I don't give them any hints about what I'm, because I have an answer in my mind and I don't say anything to them. Every single one of them, without exception, has said the accountability, how we structure accountability. So Terry, I want to come back to you for a quick second, because you've done it right. What does an accountability model really look like? How did you incentivize the schools to make that a priority? And then did you also incentivize teachers, districts, schools, individual students? How did you do that?
Perhaps.
And how would you do it differently if you were king for a day again?
I would do things differently based on what we've learned, but the key is the college career ready measure. If we continue to put all of our weight on grades 3 through 8 testing and reading and math, we will keep getting what we've got over the last 12, 15 years with No Child Left Behind, we will get focus on the bubble kids, we'll get less gifted, we'll get less focus on career tech. So while I love Katie Haycock and Ed Trust, 3 through 8 are only leading indicators of predictive nature of will a kid get to the ultimate goal of graduating from high school ready for the next step. So weighting your college career ready measures, but too many states, and I've already seen it, are looking for the soft way out on college career ready measures. They are not including industry certifications in their accountability model. And those that are doing something like that are a little too soft on it, because it needs to be an industry certification that industry signs off on, that they agree to, that those kids would get an advantage in the labor market, and it needs to be tied to your state sector strategy, to jobs that are going to pay a living wage. If you're not doing that, then you're going to have a soft career ready measure, and they're going to say you lowered standards and it just isn't going to work out well for you PR-wise, and you're not going to be successful with it. So having some type of quality council, business driven, to review those industry certifications that meet the requirements for your career ready, and then making sure the academic side is strong too, and start looking for good, clear measures, this is the big thing, of the leadership employability skills. Because you can get the academic, you can get the technical, but we didn't have a good measure of employability skills. So building those in through work-based learning and the portfolio that the kids have to complete to be true completers in your career-ready pathways. Those are probably the key drivers that I wish, if I were in Kentucky and we were revising this for ESSA now, that's what I'd kind of be working on, and making sure that those measures were weighted to a significant degree to drive the behaviors you want to see.
Wonderful. Let's stay on this topic, panelists, and I'll leave it up to whoever wants to speak out at first. Accountability, what does it look like? How's it done right? Who are you seeing that's doing a good example? Go. Okay, Steve.
Can I add to the discussion about ESSA just a bit? I think the accountability is critical, but the state plan is going to be just as important in how you design that plan, because that all relates back to the accountability. And I'll give you an example. Right now, states are providing academic credit for CTE courses in many cases, and they're doing that in a variety of ways. The new law really infuses a lot of new language around career technical education and the inclusion, but it's going to be up to states to really determine how those are included. And then you get down to the level of academic courses and the teacher certification requirements in states. Many times you have to have a degree in an academic subject, which most CTE teachers do not have. So there's some complexities there that we're going to have to work through at a state level to really be able to get an accountability system, I think, that's a robust system that's really doing all these things that we're talking about and really breaking down those silos.
Very good point. You're going to need a lot of people at the table as you do that state plan. I had the opportunity about 2 weeks ago to get my 15-minute every couple months with John King on the phone. And I said, hey, Mr. Secretary, we would like to submit a plan that is Colorado's vision for the future with feedback from everybody, not a waiver request. We're not going to say, we'd like to comply with ESSA and here's how we're going to do it. We'd rather say, here's where Colorado wants to go the next 10 years, and here's how ESSA supports that vision. So you really bring up a good point, Steve.
So I haven't committed ESSA to memory yet, but I know that one of the pieces that we've been getting a lot of questions about is dual enrollment, including data reporting. And right now, a lot of states have in statute somewhere that there has to be reporting on dual enrollment. And as many of you know in this room, CTE dual enrollment, the research says that it's perhaps even more impactful for low-income youth than traditional academic dual enrollment in terms of students' likelihood to finish high school, enroll in a post-secondary program after high school, complete that program with a meaningful credential, and so on. But states are going to have a heavy lift to get their state programs into compliance with ESA reporting requirements. And I think also the ESSA requirement will also shed light on the fact that within states we see huge discrepancies in dual enrollment participation, and we also see these huge discrepancies across states. So for example, in Iowa right now, over 30% of community college enrollments are for students under the age of 18 because they have so many students in dual enrollment programs, about 40,000, a little over 40,000. Compare that to California, where the most recent data I heard were about 4% of all high school students enrolled in community college. So even though we're seeing the national average of 10 to 11% of students, there are huge differences, and it'll be great for potentially ESSA to help address some of those inequities across states.
Great.
Okay. So what I loved most about the No Child Left Behind was the disaggregated data, so we could actually see how well we're doing for all students, not just the general averages. And when we talk about this moving forward, I think that we need to move off of high school completion and focus on post-secondary completion rates. And by post-secondary, again, I'm talking about that certification, the industry credential, the 2-year degree, 4-year degree. We need to be focused on that, and we need to disaggregate it. So we can take a great state like Massachusetts, but when you look underneath, you find out that the college completion rates are not doing well for youth with disabilities. African American youth are only 12%. About the same for Latino students. When overall it's 41%, and we can always say, oh, that looks really nice. It does. So what we have to focus on is the pipeline, and I think the pipeline dual credit's huge. One of the stories out of Wisconsin was a young lady, Latina, who had no interest in school, getting poor grades, finally took one of these career tech ed courses, got fired up about biotechnology. She spent the summer getting an industry certificate around dietitian, started working in the hospital, got 10 more credits of dual credit, and then got a full scholarships off to school. And she was not the top student in the school. But she changed, and she had a way of being in the world, which is what career readiness does. That when the youth have that planfulness and we help them start leading towards it, it's powerful. And I think another thing is we've got to stop focusing so much on passing tests and really focusing on, do you have the competencies? So we've got a lot of students who pass tests, and then when it comes to the AccuPlacer, they're dumped in a hole, and they've got to dig their way out before they can really continue. We've got to be focused on, are you demonstrating the competencies needed for college career readiness? And then the final piece in that too is part of the pipeline then is work-based learning, using that for credit recovery, using that for other skill sets, but also looking at the AP courses, and that's one of the areas that we don't talk much about, but when you look at the discrepancy of which youth are actually getting access to these AP courses, and then we started looking at the color, we started looking at disability status, and we find out it's a very small percentage, and we need to find ways to do that. So it's sort of like as the individual starts realizing there's a future goal and include family in that, we need accelerated learning opportunities to help them get the advanced competencies needed to enter into that career path. That's the key piece. By giving individuals a sense of what that is, and that's more of the formative assessment, we're empowering them with the knowledge of what they need to do and what they need to achieve to get there. And then we just have to build the systems, and it's a dual system of accelerated learning opportunities and work-based learning opportunities. One final thing on that. As we talk about STEM as one of the big areas that we're not getting youth of color and youth with disabilities into, and women as well, I think that it's work-based learning that can change that. Not because, and I know we'll say, oh good, because they'll get skills. It's not skills. It's having a caring and an engaging adult in that work setting saying, you belong here. It's about identity shift. And our youth of color and our girls, they basically turn off of STEM at an early age, and so it's not even part of their thought process of a possibility. We need to actively change that by putting them into those settings to see, yes, you can belong here, and you can thrive here, and this can be you. It doesn't mean that they're going to choose that particular area, but they're going to be incorporating STEM into their future possibilities.
Fantastic comments. Thank you so much, all of you. Are any of you aware of a state that provides either a cash or a scholarship incentive for an industry certification?
To the student or to the school district?
To the student.
To the student. No, Florida provides us something to the
Florida is
district.
for AP.
And also for the district, any
Yes.
student who earns an industry certification in high school receives, they earn $1,000 for their school district. Ohio also, in their 2015 appropriations bill, created a pot of money for school districts for any student who earns an industry certification in high school. For students, I know there's a state out there, I'm drawing a blank right now.
Anyone? Terry?
Yeah, South Carolina has legislation, the biggest cost is the industry certifications, the exams, the assessments, that kind of thing. And South Carolina's got it built in for reimbursement to school districts.
Okay, they cover that, but
Students, I'd have to think about that one a little bit. The overarching theme is No Child Left Behind was not very much of a motivator for students. It was usually a negative motivator because kids, if it didn't pass, they got doubled up in, classes and took them out of music, art, PE, and that kind of thing. So it was kind of a negative motivator in many school districts. This time, you need the alignment of the accountability down to the kid level. So the students are motivated to be successful because it means something to them.
Exactly. Thanks so much. Okay, I want to come to kind of our final question. If you work in a governor's office, raise your hand. If you work in the governor's office, raise your hand. Okay? If you are a state lawmaker, raise your hand. Okay? If you are here today from the business community, raise your hand. Cool. Okay. The majority of this, and panelists, this is kind of the concluding question here in the final 5-10 minutes we have. So the majority of this audience are those who are engaged deeply in CTE, who have a passion for it. This is the dang choir, including the business folks who are here. The governor's office, those folks are not here. State lawmakers are not here. How many superintendents are in the room? Good for you. Any others? Fantastic. I know you. I can see you guys. Recognizing some faces. But we don't necessarily have district leadership. Any school board members? Cool. Okay. A few. Thank you. But for the most part, we've got those who are believers already. What is the number one thing as they leave this conference that they should be doing to move this agenda forward? Number one thing at their level and their wheelhouse.
One thing that it was addressed in the previous panel is this whole idea of stigmatizing CTE, and we really need to address that. If I can give a quick anecdote, I was at a meeting last year and a school counselor in Georgia was talking about a mother who called her and was furious because her son had taken this career interest inventory and it turned out that he wanted to do something other than a 4-year degree. I think it was a CTE type of program. And she said, my son will not be doing that. And so she asked for the login to retake the test as her son to get different results. And I just feel like there's a need to do like an ad council. We know, don't shake a baby, smoking causes cancer, use your seatbelt. Why don't we have a similar campaign around CTE to help people understand that there's a high remediation rate in this country. There's a need for these middle skill jobs that are going unfilled. If parents and students have that type of information, I think we'll see that turn around. But right now, they don't have that information.
That was the message that Nick gave this morning. What a powerful message that was.
I liked the message yesterday. I guess I gravitate towards policy, but we had 3 folks who were from the Arizona legislature or had served at one time, and they were saying get involved in the elections and how much of a difference you can make in going out and getting those signatures for filing to make sure that you're on the ballot. It's true. I've had some of our own members who have made contact and kept up just 4 times a year even. And those staff and those members will call that individual, how do I vote on this bill? So I think it makes an immediate impression sometimes.
As a former lawmaker, I can tell you that is exactly right. And there was only one time during a 2-year cycle when lawmakers will listen to you. When is that time? It is between now and November. And in fact, in most of Arizona, it's now and where's Jim? Yeah, August. Exactly. It's now in August. Get people running for office in to see your CTE program. Show them the bioscience. Show them everything. But I hate to say it, it needs to be right now. And because school's getting out in 3 weeks, you have 3 weeks to do that, get that done. Never mind. I won't go down that path. I want to share some personal experiences, but the problem is there's too many personal people in this room that I will know. And you're like, oh, I know who that was. Okay.
Okay. So yes, I think the employers getting involved with the schools, getting involved, bringing families in. Just a quick story. I know we've got on the one end the parents that are upset about their child not getting. I was working with Singapore, and a child was dropping out of school because his interest assessment and his interests were to become a male nurse, and that was not something that the family was willing to accept. The school counselor said, what I want you to do is to take this data home, work with your family on the system to look at this career. And he came back and the father said, yes, that will be fine. That I think our parents are also missing the knowledge base that there are viable careers here and that there are ways, they all want their child to be successful. There are many ways to be successful. I think we have to help as employers, as the schools, to help the families early before they've made these decisions. I think middle schools certainly at the earliest, not the earliest point, but certainly an important point, to begin exploring what these viable options are. I think parents can be reasonable when they have the information. And what we're not doing is providing them with the exploration process. And one final thing with that is, remember that a lot of our parents need this career development too. How many of our families are underemployed or out of work and not understanding that 2-year college is a pathway to be able to bounce up economically? So we want this to be a parallel process with the youth and the family so they're both getting these career readiness skills.
That's great advice. This group could really have an impact on families.
So break down the silos. Why is it that the community college has a separate lab from the auto mechanics lab at your high school? Why are you spending double? Where is the business industry community workforce investment board and making sure the competencies are the same? Ford came into Louisville, high school had one curriculum, the community college had another, and Ford created their own program because they didn't like either one. So what a waste, what inefficient programs we have out there. So my advice is the same at the national, the state, and the local level. Get a cross-functional collaborative team and get rid of turf. And second, build communication so you can convince parents that this is the future of our country and the economic opportunities for their children rest in this area.
Wow. Scott, Terry, Jennifer, and Steve, wow. Very, very impressive. Great ideas for everyone. Thank you for being here for the panel. Bill, thank you so much for putting it together. It's an honor.
Great job.